Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into it. All right, folks. Arch Manning's getting praised. Nico has gotten dissed.
Again.
And this is becoming a running story for Tennessee Vols fans. And I tell you, my bro Chilmont has been telling me for years that the national media hates UT. And I've always tried to be kind of reasonable about it, but it's getting a little bit old hat at this point. And I think I know what it is. I really do. It started back in the day. If you'll remember, Peyton Manning got creaked out of the Heisman. He had unbelievable numbers, but he didn't beat Florida. So therefore, we can't give him the Heisman, even though his numbers were monumental. They gave it to a defensive back out of Michigan, Charles Woodson, who was a fine defensive back. But you're not going to give the Heisman to a DB when you've got a quarterback throwing for over 300 yards a game, back when people didn't do that nearly as much. So it kind of started then. Then when it really got epic, had to do with the whole Greg Schiano thing, when UT was going to possibly hire Greg Schiano, and our athletic director at that time, I believe, had maybe even offered him the job. And Vol Nation found out and threw a damn fit. They were not happy. They did not want Greg Schiano. He'd had a bad time down with Tampa, down there in the NFL. The players didn't like him. He had been at Rutgers. He'd been at Penn State. There was a lot of things that Tennessee didn't want any part of. And they just kind of went on social media and Twitter and just said, absolutely not. We do not want this guy. And the national media got very upset about it. They said that the Vol fan base should have no say in who we hire and that we should just accept whoever the athletic director hires and we shouldn't say a word, which is, I don't know, is it 1952? No, it was not. So it was kind of crazy, honestly, but they really had it out for us ever since, and especially Pat Forday and these other guys. So UT doesn't get a whole lot of respect because of that. And then on top of it, to make matters worse, you know, a lot of these national guys are tied very tightly with the NCAA. And whenever the NCAA wants to scare a fan base, like they tried to do with us recently over the Nico thing, because Nico took a plane ride from California to Knoxville, which you're never to do. I guess he should have hitchhiked or something like that. And his NIL paid for it, who he had signed with. So I don't see what the big deal is with that, but they got very upset. So the NCAA started threatening us, and they were going to investigate. And Pat Forday ran out there and said, oh, this could be the death penalty. And the NCAA usually doesn't come out and make any statements about an investigation because that's when they send out their minions to do their work for them.
Now fly! Fly!
But this time they actually came out and said, oh, it's the Wild West. You're the ones that made us do an investigation on UT. We didn't want to, but we had to. So UT made him an offer, told him, said, you don't want to do this. You do not want to do this to us.
Don't be a fool. We can do this easy, or we can do it real easy.
And NCAA didn't care. So they effed around and found out. And we did this to them.
You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home.
So the national media, who's tight with the NCAA, there's a lot of animosity towards Tennessee. Let's just accept that fact. And I have fought this for years. And like I said, my bro Chill has really warned me out about it, saying it's true. I've come to accept it. It just is what it is. We're not going to get a lot of props. We're not going to get a lot of respect. We're just going to have to go out there and take it. If you want respect, and we're just going to have to win, win, win. That's all there is to it. And Nico, look, let's get into this article. I'll show you where he was dissed. And I don't have any problem with Arch Manning, by the way. Anybody with Manning on the back of their shirt, I'm going to root for unless they're playing my Vols. But anyway, we'll get in here and I'll show you the hypocrisy of this. And this is on A to Z Sports by Zach Reagan, a very good writer, by the way. If you've not read any of Zach Reagan, you should. It says, national media outlet slights Tennessee QB Nico Iamaleava while praising Texas QB Arch Manning. And it talks about how Arch and Nico will always be linked together because one of them was rated #1 in the country and the other was rated #1 on another service. So they were kind of tied for first, so to speak. And, of course, Nico is going to be our starter this year, and he's already played in a game in the Citrus Bowl where he was the MVP. So keep that in your mind, that Nico was already shown out and was an MVP. But anyway, Arch, of course, is the backup to Quinn Ewers, who is a great quarterback, and I can understand why he's the backup. But despite his status as a backup, Manning was named by CBS Sports this weekend as one of the 10 highly ranked college football recruits that quickly are meeting the hype. And this has to do with Manning's performance in the spring game. And he had a really nice game. He threw for over 300 yards. He threw the ball with touch. I mean, he really looked good. He did. Now, it was a spring game. Most quarterbacks look really good in a spring game. But hey, the year before, he looked bad in the spring game and everybody was down on him, which I thought was ridiculous as well. Arch Manning's going to be fine. I can just go ahead and tell you he's going to be a fine quarterback. But anyway, what hype? He's meeting the hype because he had a good spring game, I guess. And it talks about CBS Sports says they labeled then freshman a bust following his dismal performance in last year's spring game and so on and so forth. But Iamaleava was not included in CBS Sports on their list of highly rated recruits that are meeting the hype. They even included Dylan Raiola. Dylan Raiola is another guy that has not played a single down. He decommitted from Georgia 24 hours before the early National Commitment Day, which honestly is National Commitment Day now. It's like the third week in December. That's National Signing Day. He decommitted 24 hours before then and left Georgia without their top recruit.
Once again, things that could have been brought to my attention yesterday!
Which I don't think Kirby appreciated at all. But anyway, they're praising him. He's meeting the hype somehow. Then it talks about Iamaleava, who scored 4 touchdowns in the Citrus Bowl. He threw with touch. He should have had 5 touchdowns. He threw a bomb, about a 50-yard bomb, that literally would have landed like a butterfly with sore feet in our receiver's hands. But the receiver lost it in the sun or something and just quit running. And I mean, it was a beautiful pass. That would have been his 5th touchdown of the day. And he got sacked 6 times. We had 3 guys out of our offensive line. And understand, Iowa has a top 10 defense. So he was running for his life most of the game and never threw an interception, never turned the ball over, and we won 35-0. But that's not meeting the hype.
You serious?
And it talks about CBS thinks that Manning's big spring game performance was more impressive than Iamaleava earning a Citrus Bowl MVP in his first career start. And by the way, there were 2 other freshmen that wound up playing in a couple of games, in bowl games that you may remember. One was the Florida State freshman. That poor kid, he's a 3-star, and played against Georgia, which, can you imagine that being your big opening game? And Florida State had 10 NFL recruits that wound up getting drafted that didn't play in that game. They had 10 guys drafted. Not one of them played in the game. They all opted out. Georgia had 8 that were drafted in the NFL. 6 of them did play in the game. So the team you saw that played Georgia was not the Florida State team that we saw all year. And that's really unfortunate because it made them look bad. And that would have been a very different game had all 10 of those guys, or like 8 of them played. It would have been a very different game. I'm not saying they'd have beat Georgia because I honestly thought Georgia was the best team in the country last year. But it would have been competitive.
Okay.
And Reagan said, it's just that if anyone is deserving of being praised as a highly rated recruit that's meeting the hype, it's got to be Nico over Arch. I don't think there's any question about it. But that's what I'm talking about with the bias against Tennessee. And it's something we're just going to have to get used to because it's not going to change, especially with us taking down the NCAA like we did. We pretty much wrecked them, and now they can't do anything. They've stopped all their investigations, which Florida Gators,
You're welcome.
yeah, you're welcome. We saved your booty on that one. You were going to get in a lot of trouble over that Jaden Rashada deal where you didn't pay him his $13 million. It's going to be that way for a good long time. And Nico's probably never going to get the praise he deserves regardless of how he plays. But eventually, if he plays good enough, it won't make any difference. Because that's the thing. Winning cures a lot of problems. And that's what Tennessee needs to go out and do. Because Nico's not going to get his props. He's not. He's the $8 million guy. He was part of the whole NCAA thing that wrecked their buddies. And there's a lot of jealousy. There's a lot of envy and a lot of anger out there over Nico and Tennessee. There just is. And we're probably just going to have to get really used to it. And I hate to admit my bro Chilmont was right, but here it is once again. It's so obvious. The guy literally won MVP in the Citrus Bowl, and he's not listed as a top 10 that's meeting the hype. Crazy. But Arch, who, again, I think is going to be a fine quarterback, has a good spring practice, and they're ready to hand him the Heisman, which should have gone to Peyton, by the way. But anyway, That's a whole nother subject. And if you like this content, well, if you're a Tennessee fan, you probably don't. But I'm just hitting you with the truth. The truth hurts. Anyway, hit this little button right here. This is the subscribe button right here. Hit this, it'll help you get this type of content. And right over here is the most recent video YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. And we'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.